What if I told you that every single buyer I've represented this year who used financing walked away from their appraisal with between $10,000 and $25,000 in equity before they ever put a single piece of furniture in the house? No paper equity, not wait 5 years and see, actual real appraised equity, verified by a licensed appraiser hired by the bank, money that was yours the moment you signed the closing docs. I'm Darren Dowling, co-owner of Beyond Realty here in Sarasota, Florida, and today I'm going to walk you through exactly how this happened, why it keeps happening, and what it means for you if you're thinking about buying a home in Southwest Florida right now. Because here's the thing, this isn't luck. It's not a market fluke. It's a result of a very specific negotiating strategy I use with every buyer client I work with. In every transaction, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how it works. So stay with me. This is one of the most important things you'll hear if you're planning a real estate purchase in this market. All right, let's start with the basics because I want to make sure we're all speaking the same language here. Equity is the difference between what your home is worth and what you owe on it. Simple as that. If your home is appraised at $500,000 and you owe $300,000 on your mortgage, you have $200,000 in equity. Now, most people think about equity as something you build over time. You make your mortgage payments, the market appreciates, and after 10 or 15 years, you've got a significant chunk of wealth sitting in that property. That's true. But what I'm talking about is something different. I'm talking about instant equity, the equity you have on day one before you've made a single mortgage payment. Here's how it works in practice. Let's say you and I negotiate a purchase price of $600,000 on a home. You go under contract, the lender orders an appraisal, and the appraiser, an independent, professional, licensed person who doesn't work for me or you, comes back and says this home is worth $625,000. What just happened? You just brought a $625,000 asset for $600,000. You have $25,000 worth of equity on day one. That's real money, real wealth. Now multiply that across 2 years of transactions and a shift in Southwest Florida market. My buyers haven't just gotten lucky on one deal. Every single financing transaction this year in 2026 has come back with an appraisal above contract price. Every single one. The range has been between 10,000 on the low end to 25,000 on the high end. In a market where average prices are hovering around $750,000. That's a meaningful advantage. So the question is, why does this keep happening? Is it the market? Is it the timing? Or is it something specific about the way I'm negotiating these deals? The answer is all three, and I'm going to break it down for you. Before I get into the negotiating strategy specifically, I want to give you some context about the Southwest Florida market right now, because it's important. It's an important background for everything else I'm going to say. We are in a unique moment in Sarasota, Manatee, and Charlotte counties. The market has shifted from the frenzy we saw in 2001 and 2002, when buyers were waiving appraisals, paying 20% over asking, and competing against 30 other offers. That era is over. What we're now in is a more balanced market. Inventory has increased. Days on market have stretched out. Sellers who were holding firm at the peak pricing era have, in many cases, had to recalibrate their expectations. Here's why that matters for you. As a buyer, there is now room to negotiate. There is room to structure an offer that protects you, that creates breathing space between the contract price and where the market actually is. During the frenzy years, appraisals were the buyer's enemy. If you offered over asking and the appraisal came back in at below list price, you either had to make up the difference in cash, renegotiate with a frustrated seller, or walk away. That was a real problem for a lot of buyers. But in this market, that dynamic has flipped. Sellers are more motivated. List prices in many cases have room in them, room between where the seller wants to be and where the market actually values the property. My job is to find that room and negotiate into it on your behalf. The communities I work in most frequently, Lakewood Ranch, Wellen Park, the Barrier Island luxury market, and around Sarasota proper, all have their own microdynamics. And I know those microdynamics. In Lakewood Ranch, for example, you've got a master plan community of over 31,000 acres. You've got new construction coming online continuously. You've got CDDs and HOAs that factor into true cost of ownership and therefore it affects what a buyer is willing to pay, which creates downward pressure on prices that a sharp negotiator like myself can use. In Wellen Park, you've got a newer community at about 11,000 acres, still in significant growth phases where builder incentives can be substantial and where understanding the difference between list price and actual value is crucial. The point is, market knowledge is the foundation of good negotiating. You can't negotiate what you don't understand, and that brings me to exactly what I do differently. All right, let's get into it. How do I consistently negotiate contracts that come in below appraised value? There are 5 pillars to this, and I'm going to walk you through each one. Pillar 1, comprehensive comparative market analysis before we write a single offer. Conduct a deep comparative market analysis, otherwise known as a CMA, and I mean deep, not just a curiosity glance at what's sold in neighborhoods. I'm looking at price per square foot, days on market, list to sales price ratios, whether the seller has done one price reduction or more, how long ago the last comparable sale was, and whether that comp was in arm's length. What this me a very picture of whether the market actually is. What this actually does is it gives me a very precise picture of where the market actually is versus where the seller thinks it is. More often than not, in this environment, there's a gap I can negotiate into. The appraisal, remember, is based on comps. If I know the comps cold, I can see before we ever make an offer whether there's room for an appraisal to come in above where we're going to contract. That's the target I'm aiming for. Pillar 2 is understanding the seller's motivation. Every seller has a story. Are they relocating for work? Are they going through a life transition? Did they buy the property at a different price point and have significant equity? And that equity gives them a cushion. Have they already purchased their next home? And are they carrying 2 mortgages? I spend real time understanding seller motivation because seller motivation determines how much flexibility exists in a negotiation. A motivated seller is a seller you can negotiate with. And in today's market, motivated sellers are not hard to find. The key is asking the right questions through the listing agent and reading between the lines of the listing details. How many days on market? How many price reductions? The condition of the home, the quality of the listing photos. All of this tells a story. Now, pillar 3, offer structure as a strategic tool. The offer price is just one piece of the puzzle. The terms of the offer, closing timeline, inspection contingencies, what's included versus what's excluded, whether you're asking the seller for concessions, or all of these are negotiating levers. Sometimes the smartest move is to offer a slightly higher price in exchange for meaningful concessions that reduce your actual out of pocket at closing. Sometimes it's the opposite. A clean, fast close with fewer contingencies is worth more to a motivated seller than a high price with complications. I match the offer structure to the seller's specific situation. That customization is what separates a transaction that falls apart from one that closes clean and closes with equity built in. Pillar 4 is the appraisal contingency as leverage. Most buyers think the appraisal contingency is purely defensive. It protects you if the home doesn't appraise. And yes, that's true, but I use it as an offensive tool as well. In a balanced market, sellers know that if they price the house too aggressively, an appraisal is going to be a problem. That risk is a negotiating chip. When I'm making an offer, I'm factoring in where I believe the property will appraise based on the comps I've already analyzed. If I think the property will appraise above what we're offering, we're in a very strong position. If I think there's an appraisal risk, I adjust strategically. The result, we're not just hoping for a good appraisal, we're engineering the conditions for one. Now, pillar 5 is the long-term relationship with the lending process. The 5th pillar may be the least talked about, but it matters enormously. I work closely with lenders throughout the transaction. I understand the appraisal process and I understand what appraisers look for, and I communicate proactively to make sure the deal is positioned correctly every step of the way. This isn't about gaming the system. Appraisers are independent professionals, and it would be inappropriate to try to influence their conclusions. What it's about is making sure the transaction is clean, the documentation is thorough, and the comparables that support the value are well established. That professionalism flows through to the outcome. But those 5 pillars together, put those 5 pillars together, deep CNA, put those 5 pillars together, deep CMA work, understanding seller motivation, strategic offer structure, intelligent use of the appraisal contingency, and a professional lending process. And what you get is a consistent pattern of buyers arriving at closing with equity already in the bank. $10,000 to $25,000 every finance transaction this year. This isn't an accident, that's a system. So let's talk about what this actually means if you're watching this and you're thinking about making a move to Southwest Florida. Maybe you're in Chicago or Detroit or the Bay Area. Maybe you've been watching the market for a year or two. Maybe you've done a visit or two, walked through some properties, started to picture what life could look like. Here's the one thing I want you to understand. The window that we're in right now is genuinely. Here's the one thing I want you to understand. The window that we're in right now is genuinely favorable for buyers. It's not going to be that way forever, and here's why. Interest rates, which have been the dominant headwind for buyers over the last few years, are showing signs of moderation. As rates come down, buyer demand is going to increase. As buyer demand increases, competition for well-priced properties is going to intensify. The negotiating leverage that exists right now, the leverage that has allowed my buyers to land $10,000 to $25,000 under appraised value, is a function of that specific market moment. When the market heats back up, that leverage compresses. You move back towards offer wars, back towards waiving contingencies, back towards paying at or above appraised value. That environment is coming. It's not here yet, but it is coming. The buyers who will look back on 2025 and say, that was the right time to buy, they're the ones who acted while the balance of power was in their favor. The ones who had a skilled negotiator in their corner, the ones who didn't wait for the perfect timing or perfect certainty. Because let's be honest, that's never existed. Nobody times the market perfectly, but some windows are clearly better than others. And I'm telling you, from the trenches of this market, right now is a solid and a very good window. The equity you could walk away from closing with isn't just a feel-good number, it's a buffer against any short-term market fluctuations. It's wealth that goes on your personal balance sheet the day you close. It's a head start, and frankly, It's what a good agent is supposed to deliver for you. Now, I want to take a couple minutes here to be transparent with you about who I am and what Beyond Realty is about, because I think it matters when you're choosing who you trust with one of the biggest financial transactions of your life. Beyond Realty is a boutique luxury brokerage. I'm not a factory. I don't have 100 agents running in 100 directions with little oversight or accountability. When you work with me, you get my direct cell phone, my direct attention, and the full weight of my knowledge on this specific market. I specialize in Southwest Florida luxury market, Sarasota, Lakewood Ranch, Wellen Park, and the Barrier Islands. This is not a market to dabble in. It's the only market I work in. That focus has compounded into a level of market intelligence that I don't think you can get from a generalist or from a national brand agent who covers 5 counties and 3 market segments. My primary clients are affluent buyers relocating from high tax states, people who have built significant wealth, who are thoughtful about how they deploy it, and who deserves a real estate advisor who treats. My primary clients are affluent buyers relocating from high tax states, people who have built significant wealth, who are thoughtful about how they deploy it, and who deserves a real estate advisor who treats this purchase as a serious investment decision. I also want to be straight with you about something. I am not an agent who will tell you what you want to hear. I'm the agent who will tell you what you need to hear. If the property's overpriced, I'll tell you. If the appraisal risk is real, I'll tell you. If the timing isn't right or the deal isn't clean, I'll tell you. That's the kind of representation that produces the outcomes I've been describing today. Not cheerleading, not deal at any cost, disciplined, data-driven advocacy for your financial interests. The proof is in the results. Every financing transaction I've closed this year in 2026 has come in below the appraised value. My buyers are arriving at closing with equity. That is a standard I hold myself to, and I'm proud of it. If you're seriously considering a move to Southwest Florida, whether it's this year, next year, or you're in early research mode, I'd encourage you to reach out and have a real conversation. Not a sales pitch, a conversation. Where are you in the process? What are your must-haves? What does your ideal property look like? What concerns do you have? I want to understand your situation before I say a single word about what I can offer you. That consultation is completely free, completely no pressure, and completely confidential. I do these calls with people all the time, and even when the timing isn't right for them to buy, they always walk away with clarity they didn't have before. You can find me at beyondrealtyfl.com. You can reach me directly. My contact info is in the description below. And if you've made it this far in this video, I'd ask you to do me one favor. Subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell. I put out market updates, community comparisons, and real unfiltered analysis of what's happening in this market on a regular basis. No fluff, no hype, just information you can actually use. I'm Darren Dowling. My buyers arrived at closing this year with $10,000 to $25,000 of equity they didn't have before we started negotiating. So let's talk about how I can do the same for you. That's all we've got time for today in this video, but I'll see you next week with another one. See you then.